Have you ever wondered how much of your life is really yours and how much is just a reaction to what others want from you? Think about it. How many times have you said yes when your whole body screamed no? How often have you smiled to keep the peace even when it tore something inside you? It starts small, a nod, a favor, a silence. But over time, those little moments add up. They shape you, and without realizing it, you become a version of yourself molded not by truth, but by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing love. And so you adapt. You become agreeable, pleasant, easy to like. You chase validation like it's oxygen. But the more you seek approval, the further you drift from yourself. It doesn't feel wrong, though. Not at first. Because the world rewards the pleasers. You're told you're kind, thoughtful, generous. You hear praise, but deep down, something doesn't sit right. Because you're not just giving, you're erasing. You're sacrificing your time, your energy, your boundaries just to make others comfortable. You start to feel invisible, but you don't know why. It's because you're hiding your truth behind a mask of politeness. You're not living, you're performing. And here's the part no one tells you. That need to please isn't kindness. It's a trap, a quiet prison disguised as virtue. You see, when your worth is tied to someone else's opinion, you're no longer free. You're not in control. They are. Anyone who figures out you fear disapproval can manipulate you. They know all they have to do is frown, stay silent, or threaten to walk away, and you'll fold. You'll chase after them just to feel okay again. That's how people play you, by sensing your need to be accepted. And once they know you'll trade your truth for a smile, they own you. Not with chains, but with expectations. But there's a way out, a way to take your power back. It starts with killing the need to please, not softening it, not managing it, killing it. Because when you no longer need validation to breathe, you become untouchable. You speak honestly, you move freely, you live aligned. People can disagree with you, dislike you, even leave, and it won't break you. That's the power they don't want you to have, because the moment you stop seeking approval is the moment you start commanding respect. That's when the manipulation ends. So if you've ever felt exhausted from trying to be everything for everyone, stay with me. If you've ever wondered why you feel lost, hollow, disconnected, this is your moment. Because everything changes when you realize you don't have to earn your worth. You were already enough even before the pretending started. By the end of this, you'll understand how to reclaim yourself, how to set fire to the false, and how to rise into a life where no one can play you again. Not because you're cruel, but because you're finally free. You think you're keeping the peace, but what you're really doing is abandoning yourself in pieces. Every small betrayal, the fake laugh, the silent nod, the favor you didn't want to give, it chips away at your spirit. You tell yourself it's just easier this way, that it's not worth the conflict. That being liked is safer than being honest. But over time, that comfort turns toxic. You become so used to swallowing your truth that you forget what it feels like to speak it. You become addicted to being agreeable even when it costs you your pride. And here's the harsh truth. The world does not reward self-erasure. It exploits it, because when you show people that your boundaries are optional, they will test you again and again. Not because they're evil, but because they can. There's a lie that people-pleasing is noble. It's the mark of a good heart, but what it really is fear in disguise. Fear of being seen as difficult, fear of losing love, fear of being alone. So you smile through discomfort, you shrink to make others feel big. You carry burdens that were never yours just to avoid disappointing anyone. But inside, resentment builds. You start to feel like you're drowning in obligations you never agreed to. And even when you do everything right, it's never enough. Because people don't love you more when you give more. They just expect more. And the moment you hesitate, they'll call you selfish, cold, changed. But all you've really done is wake up. Understand this. There is a cost to being liked by everyone. And the price is you, your time, your voice, your truth, your peace. Every time you abandon your needs to satisfy someone else's expectations, you send yourself a message. You don't matter. And your subconscious believes it. You begin to live as if your worth depends on your usefulness. But you are not a tool. You are not a prop in someone else's comfort. You are not put here to meet every demand, answer every text, show up for every crisis while ignoring your own. You are here to live fully, speak truthfully, and protect the sacred space of your inner world. Real strength is not in keeping everyone happy. It's in knowing that you don't have to. It's in choosing your peace over their comfort, your truth over their approval. Because here's the freedom they don't teach you. Once you stop needing to be liked, you start being respected. When your yes is real and your no is firm, people begin to listen. Not because you're louder, but because you're rooted. The world senses when someone has nothing to prove. That presence is magnetic, not desperate, not loud, just clear. And in that clarity, you stop being a puppet. You become a force, no longer controlled by fear, but guided by purpose. And that changes everything. That's when you begin to rise on your terms and your power without apology. There comes a moment when you realize you've been asking for permission to be yourself. Not out loud, but through every cautious step you've taken. You wait for the nod, the smile, the approval before you speak your truth. You dress for the role they expect. You soften your edges so you won't make waves. You play it safe because being fully seen feels dangerous. You fear that if you show them the real you, they'll walk away. And that fear becomes the leash, the one that keeps you tame, predictable, controlled. But the part of you that wants to be free, that deep burning part, never dies. It waits, it watches. It grows restless every time you shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. You've been conditioned to believe that worth must be earned. That love is a reward for compliance. That acceptance only comes when you're good, agreeable, selfless. But here's the truth no one says out loud. Unconditional love starts with you. If you can't accept yourself without needing to please, no amount of praise will ever fill the void. Validation is like sugar. It gives a quick high but never satisfies. You crave more, need more, until your identity depends on it. And the ones who sense that dependency, they become your masters. Not because they're stronger, but because you've handed them the leash. You must break that bond, not by becoming cruel, not by building walls, but by returning to yourself, by remembering who you were before the world taught you to trade authenticity for affection. You were not born to be small. You were not built to be agreeable at the cost of your soul. The moment you decide to value your truth more than their opinion, everything begins to shift. You stop asking, will they still like me? And you start asking, do I still like me? That question is power. That question is freedom. And yes, it will feel uncomfortable at first. People will question you. They'll push back. They'll accuse you of changing, but you're not changing. You're coming home. You're reclaiming the parts of you you once buried to survive. And that is not weakness. It is rebirth. The discomfort you feel isn't a warning. It's a signal that you're finally stepping out of the cage. Let it burn. Let it stretch you. Let it make you new. Because once you stop living for approval, you begin to live with intention. You no longer move to be liked. You move to be real. You no longer bend out of fear. You stand because you believe. And that inner alignment, that silent knowing becomes your armor. The world may not clap. Some may leave. But the ones who stay will see the real you, and that is a connection worth everything. No more pretending. No more shrinking. No more asking for permission to exist. You don't need it. You never did. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be real, and real cannot be played. When you no longer need the world to approve of you, you begin to see it clearly. The games, the manipulation, the silent pressure to conform, it all becomes obvious. You stop mistaking guilt for morality. You stop confusing discomfort with wrongness. You realize how much of your behavior was never truly yours. It was a performance rehearsed in silence, driven by the hope that if you just did enough, gave enough, softened enough, you'd finally feel whole. But wholeness doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from self-ownership, from waking up one day and saying, I'm not here to be anyone's version of who I should be. That decision is the beginning of everything, because the ones who seek to control you won't use force. They'll use your need to be seen as good. They'll weaponize your empathy. They'll twist your kindness until it becomes a leash, and every time you choose peace over truth, they win. Every time you stay silent to avoid being judged, you give them ground. But when you finally choose your voice over their comfort, their power dissolves. They can't guilt you. They can't shame you. They can't use your fear against you, because fear no longer controls you. You felt the sting of disapproval and survived. You faced their disappointment and stayed standing. And in that fire, you found something deeper than approval. You found self-respect. Self-respect is quiet. It doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't need applause. But it shows up in how you speak, how you walk, how you say no without explaining yourself. It lives in the pause before you respond, in the choice to let go instead of chase, in the strength to walk away from anything that asks you to become less than you are. When you have self-respect, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop justifying your boundaries. You stop overgiving, over-explaining, overextending. You simply exist, in truth, in peace, in power. And that's when everything begins to realign. People may leave, yes. The ones who only loved the mask will fall away, but they were never yours. They were drawn to who you pretended to be. And their absence isn't a loss. It's a clearing, a sacred space for truth to breathe, for the right ones to find you. The ones who don't need you to shrink or bend or hide to be worthy of love. But none of that can begin until you kill the need to please. Because as long as that need lives, you will always be at the mercy of someone else's expectations. Let it die. Let it fall away. Not in bitterness, but in liberation. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be whole, to be fierce, to be real, to walk into the world without apology. That is your birthright. And no one, not friends, not family, not society, can take it from you unless you hand it over. It's time to take it back, quietly, powerfully, permanently. Something seems to have gone wrong. Here is a 12-part detailed script outline, each section designed to be developed into exactly 500 words, structured for a faceless YouTube motivational video. The tone is emotionally intense, psychologically driven, and transformation-focused, based on the powerful title, They Can't Play You If You Kill the Need to Please Machiavellian. The hidden cost of pleasing everyone start with a sharp, emotionally gripping question that hits the viewer's identity and self-worth. Explore how people-pleasing begins as a survival tactic, but slowly turns into a form of self-erasure. Explain the emotional fatigue, silent resentment, and identity confusion that arise when we sacrifice authenticity for acceptance. Build momentum by showing the high personal cost of being agreeable. End with a promise of freedom on the other side. 2. Why they can play you and how they know. Unpack the psychology behind manipulation. Explain how the need to be liked becomes a weakness others detect and exploit. Highlight behavioral patterns manipulators use, guilt tripping, passive aggression, silent treatment, and why people pleasers are the easiest targets. Stir emotional intensity by showing how much power is unknowingly given away. Set up the urgency of reclaiming control. 3. The lie behind the mask. Peel back the layers of the nice persona. Show how fake harmony leads to internal chaos. Describe the exhaustion that comes from always saying yes, smiling through discomfort, and avoiding confrontation. Drive home the idea that being likable is not the same as being respected. Build pressure by confronting the fear of rejection head-on. 4. Why you keep shrinking. And don't even see it. Delve into the psychology of conditioning, explaining how approval-seeking behavior is often rooted in childhood. Reveal the subconscious scripts running in the background. If I upset them, I'll lose love. Challenge the viewer to recognize how their patterns are no longer serving them. Make the internal prison visible. Begin to show the key. 5. Guilt is not a moral compass. Redefine guilt. Expose it as a tool often used by others to control behavior. Explain the difference between guilt driven by values versus guilt driven by conditioning. Liberate the viewer by helping them understand that saying no does not make them a bad person. Build strength in choosing discomfort over self-betrayal. 6. Approval is the addiction that feeds control. Compare validation seeking to an addiction. Explore the dopamine cycle of external praise. Show how this creates dependency and opens the door to control. Warn that so long as others are your emotional supply, you will always be at their mercy. Ignite the will to detox from approval entirely. 7. You don't owe anyone a version of you that isn't real. Challenge the viewer to stop editing themselves for the comfort of others. Reinforce that real connection can only happen when we're real. Explain that honesty may lead to loss, but only of what wasn't authentic to begin with. Build courage through the lens of self-loyalty. 8. The power of discomfort and the birth of boundaries. Teach that discomfort is the cost of growth. Explain that boundaries are not walls. They are filters for energy and respect. Build emotional resilience by reinforcing the value of honoring your own limits. Show that boundaries don't push people away. They reveal who's willing to meet you in truth. 9. Self-respect begins where pleasing ends. Define self-respect in action. Saying no without apology, making decisions without permission, speaking truth without guilt. Show how real confidence is built not by being agreeable, but by being grounded. Elevate the emotional reward, inner peace, clarity, and unshakable self-trust. 10. From being played to being unplayable, describe what happens when you fully kill the need to please. You become unpredictable to manipulators. Their old tactics stop working. You become immune to guilt, silent treatment, or praise, withholding. Build the image of someone untouchable, not because they're cruel, but because they're complete. 11. Let them leave and let the right ones stay. Highlight the emotional courage it takes to let people walk away. Redefine loss as alignment. The ones who only loved your performance were never your people. When you stop bending, only those who value the real you remain. Build hope, integrity, and power in the idea of authentic connection. 12. The freedom no one can give you or take away end with a high emotion, high impact finale. Describe the deep, quiet liberation that comes when you no longer live to be liked. You are no longer trapped by guilt, by fear, by approval addiction. You move with clarity. You speak with truth. You become your own authority. Leave the audience with a call to rise, not louder, but truer. End with intensity and the feeling that their whole life can shift starting now. Each of these 12 sections builds naturally on the one before it, guiding the viewer step by step from emotional captivity to personal liberation. Let me know when you'd like to begin developing the next full section. What if your need to be liked is the very thing keeping you trapped? Think about that for a moment. You've spent your life trying to be the one who's easy to be around, who doesn't cause problems, who's always agreeable. You've been the one who makes sacrifices in silence, who swallows their truth just to keep the peace. And maybe you've done it so long you don't even notice it anymore. It feels normal, expected. Deep down, something aches. You feel the quiet exhaustion of always being what others need you to be, never what you actually are. You try so hard to be enough for everyone else that you forget to be enough for yourself. You smile when you don't want to. You say yes when every part of you screams no. You comfort others while no one notices you're bleeding inside. And you tell yourself it's kindness. You tell yourself it's strength. But a part of you knows the truth. It's fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being disliked. Fear of rejection. And it's that fear they play on. It's that fear that turns your kindness into a weakness they can exploit. You weren't born to please. You weren't created to live your life trying to earn love. You were meant to be free, clear, bold, and untamed. But you've been conditioned to believe that love must be traded for performance. That if you're just good enough, agreeable enough, small enough, then maybe they'll stay. Maybe they'll approve. But even when they do, it's not real. It's not love. It's control dressed in compliments. And the longer you stay in that game, the more you forget your own worth. That's what they don't want you to realize. The moment you kill the need to please, the game ends. The guilt loses power. The manipulation doesn't land. They can't use your fear against you anymore. You stop being predictable. You stop being moldable. You stop being a puppet. And for the first time, you start living on your own terms. That is the shift. That is the transformation. And it doesn't happen by accident. It happens by choice. A choice to stop living for applause. A choice to stop seeking permission to exist. There's something waiting for you on the other side of that choice. Peace, power, clarity. A version of you that doesn't walk on eggshells, doesn't apologize for existing, doesn't twist and bend to fit into boxes. A version of you that commands respect without ever raising your voice. That kind of strength doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being whole, from finally choosing yourself not just once, but every single time. This is the beginning of that path. And if you keep walking step by step, you'll become someone no one can play, no one can shake, and no one can use. Stay with this, because what's waiting for you isn't just motivation. It's your freedom. They know exactly how to control you because you've shown them what matters most to you. Every time you overextend yourself, stay silent, or swallow your truth just to be liked, you reveal your pressure point. The need to please is a silent admission that your worth depends on someone else's reaction. And when that truth is visible, you become easy to manipulate. They don't need to use force. They don't need to raise their voice. All they have to do is look disappointed, pull away slightly, or hint that you've let them down. And just like that, you bend, you adjust, you try harder. Not because they're right, but because you've been trained to feel unworthy when someone else is unhappy. But their disapproval is not your mirror. Their silence is not a sign that you've failed. Their discomfort is not a reason to abandon yourself. Yet this is how the game works. The more you need them to validate your goodness, your kindness, your right to exist, the more you lose control. You become reactive. You second-guess everything. You apologize for things that weren't wrong. You give away your voice, your time, your boundaries just to feel safe. But it's a false safety, because as long as your peace depends on their mood, you're not free. You're performing, you're surviving, you're being played. You don't win by pleasing harder. You don't gain respect by always being agreeable. Real power comes when you become unshakable. When you stop needing approval and start standing in truth. That's when the dynamic shifts. That's when the manipulator loses their grip. They can't bait you with guilt. They can't confuse you with silence. They can't punish you with absence, because you no longer see their opinion as truth. You've stopped outsourcing your identity. You've started listening to your own voice. And that voice, it knows. It knows when you're betraying yourself. It knows when you're abandoning your values to keep the peace. It knows when you're shrinking to avoid confrontation. That inner knowing is your compass, and every time you ignore it, it gets quieter. But the moment you listen, really listen, it gets louder, stronger, clearer. It tells you who you are. It tells you what matters. And it reminds you that you were never meant to live in fear of disappointing people who benefit from your silence. This is where you take your power back, not by fighting them, not by proving anything, but by refusing to play the game. When you stop reacting to manipulation, it has nowhere to go. When you stop craving approval, they lose their leverage. And when you finally realize that you don't owe anyone your obedience to be worthy of respect, something changes. You change. You stop being easy to play. You stop being afraid. You start moving from strength. And in that shift, you reclaim what was always yours, your clarity, your voice, and your freedom to live as you are, unapologetically. They've trained you to believe that being nice is noble, that biting your tongue makes you mature, that agreeing makes you wise. But that's not virtue. It's self-erasure dressed as politeness. You've confused being harmless with being good, and that confusion is costing you your identity. Every time you make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's expectations, you are rejecting the truth of who you are. You become a mirror for their comfort, never a reflection of your own soul. And it eats away at you quietly, steadily, until you wake up one day and don't recognize the person you've become. This is how people lose themselves, not in one big dramatic moment, but slowly through every smile that wasn't real, every yes that meant no, every time they swallowed their truth because they didn't want to seem difficult. You think you're keeping the peace, but the real war is happening inside you. Your silence is not peace. Your people-pleasing is not kindness. It's a mask, and you've worn it for so long it feels like skin. But the longer you wear it, the further you drift from your own essence. You begin to crave approval like oxygen, and you stop breathing without it. That's how they keep you pliable. As long as you're terrified of being disliked, you'll never speak with conviction. You'll keep asking for permission when you already have the answer. You'll wait for someone to tell you it's okay to take up space, but no one will, because the more you sacrifice for others, the more they expect you to keep doing it. What you call being accommodating, they call weakness. What you think is selfless, they see as opportunity. It's not cruelty, it's human nature. When you teach people that your needs come last, don't be surprised when they believe you. But there is something deeper in you that wants out. The part that remembers who you were before the world taught you to chase acceptance. The part that feels the tension in your chest every time you betray yourself to keep the peace. That part is still alive. It hasn't given up. It's waiting for you to listen. And when you finally do, everything shifts. You begin to value discomfort over dishonesty. You begin to choose truth even when it shakes things. You begin to stand up for yourself not because you're angry, but because you're awake. You don't need to ask for permission to be real. You don't need to prove your worth through self-denial. You don't need to be pleasing to be powerful. You just need to decide that your authenticity matters more than their approval. That decision, right there, is the beginning of your return to yourself. Not the edited version, not the filtered persona, the real you, the bold, unafraid, imperfect you. The one who knows that truth isn't always soft, and peace isn't always quiet, but both are worth everything. And when you choose them over comfort, you stop being played. You start being free. When you stop needing others to like you stop fearing who you really are. That's the moment your power begins to rise. Not the kind that seeks control over others, but the kind that can't be controlled by anyone. When you're no longer adjusting yourself to win favor, you begin to operate from truth instead of performance. You stop anticipating reactions and start honoring reality. You stop trying to be enough for them and start realizing you were never lacking in the first place. The game they used to play with your self-worth ends because you're no longer on the board. You become untouchable when you are no longer emotionally invested in pleasing people who benefit from your compliance. Their approval no longer excites you. Their disappointment no longer scares you. You don't chase their validation because you're not starved for it anymore. You've gone inward. You've reclaimed the parts of yourself you gave away to keep others comfortable. And once you do that, you see the entire world differently. You begin to sense the quiet pressure in every conversation where you used to shrink. You notice the emotional transactions in every harmless request. And you no longer agree just to avoid the storm, because you'd rather weather the storm than live a lie. This shift isn't about becoming cold. It's not about shutting people out or rejecting connection. It's about rising above the need to be liked so that connection becomes a choice, not a survival mechanism. You stop selling pieces of yourself for moments of acceptance. You stop apologizing for having needs, boundaries, or emotions. You stop translating your worth into how many people clap for you. And it's not pride, it's clarity. You know it matters now. You've been bent for too long, and this is you straightening out, not with aggression, but with alignment. They will notice. The ones who relied on your silence, your flexibility, your willingness to take the blame, they will feel the difference. They will try to pull you back into the role you've always played. They may call you selfish. They may call you selfish. They may accuse you of changing. But that's exactly the point. You are changing. You are evolving into someone they can no longer manipulate. And their discomfort is not your burden to carry. You are not responsible for the emotions of those who thrived when you abandoned yourself. The only responsibility you have now is to stay loyal to the truth. To no longer betray your voice for a smile, to no longer shrink so others can feel to no longer wait for permission to be who you are. This is what freedom looks like. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's steady, it's deep, and once you feel it, you never want to go back. Because the peace of being true to yourself will always outweigh the comfort of being accepted for someone you're not. This is how they stop playing you, when there's nothing left in you to exploit. Only truth, only strength, only self. You were never born to be passive. The truth has always lived inside you, but it got buried under years of fear, shame, and the desire to be seen as good. The world taught you to trade your authenticity for approval, and you believed the lie that safety comes from being agreeable. But now, something in you is awakening. You're no longer satisfied with being liked if it means being invisible. You're no longer willing to contort yourself into a version that makes others comfortable but leaves you disconnected. You're tired of playing roles that earn applause but rob you of peace. That tiredness is not weakness. It's your soul refusing to be silenced any longer. You don't have to be cruel to be clear. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to stop needing permission to honor your own voice. Every time you say yes out of fear, you betray your inner truth. And every time you say no with clarity, you reclaim a piece of yourself. You're not here to be palatable. You're here to be whole. And that wholeness means being able to live in a world where not everyone agrees with you, where not everyone accepts you, and still knowing you are enough. When you kill the need to please, what you're really doing is cutting the puppet strings that kept you dancing for validation. You're no longer emotionally blackmailed by disapproval. You're no longer negotiating your boundaries like they're a favor instead of a right. And you stop over-explaining because you realize your truth doesn't require a defense. You become solid, calm, focused. You don't chase approval because you've finally approved of yourself. And that kind of self-acceptance, quiet, steady, and unshakable, is the greatest protection you'll ever know. Others might call it distance, but it's clarity. Others might call it rebellion, but it's return. You're not turning against them. You're returning to you, the you that stopped asking what people wanted you to be, the you that doesn't flinch when someone disapproves, the you that no longer reacts to pressure because you're guided by principle. You don't explain yourself to people who never asked to understand. You don't justify your peace to those who profit from your chaos. You don't wait to be chosen by those who only want you when you're useful. You walk, even if you walk alone. This isn't about winning arguments. It's about no longer needing to have them. It's not about proving your strength. It's about knowing you don't have to fight to be free. You've stepped out of the game. You've stopped letting the fear of being misunderstood shrink your voice. You've accepted that not everyone will see you clearly, and that's okay. What matters is that you see yourself fully, without apology, without guilt, without asking for a stamp of approval from people who don't know your path. That's what makes you untouchable. That's what makes you free. You are not difficult for having standards. You are not arrogant for protecting your energy. You are not selfish for putting your peace above their preferences. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that love meant sacrifice. That connection meant compliance. That saying no meant you were pushing people away. But what if you've been taught wrong? What if true strength is not in how much you can tolerate, but in how clearly you can draw the line between who you are and who they want you to be? You've been conditioned to believe that being accepted by others is the highest form of safety. But real safety only exists when you accept yourself without compromise. If you always bend, people will expect you to stay bent. And the moment you stand up straight, they will act like you're the problem. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of the role they built for you and how uncomfortable they feel when you outgrow it. You don't owe them the watered-down version of who you are just because it made them more comfortable. Your growth is not an attack. Your boundaries are not betrayal. Your clarity is not cruelty. When you decide to honor yourself, you break the unspoken contract that said your silence was their comfort zone. And some people will leave because of that. Let them. The ones who needed your compliance will never understand your clarity. But that's not your responsibility. You were not born to be emotionally manageable. You were born to be whole. And wholeness means you stop negotiating your identity for temporary peace. You stop dimming your fire just to make sure no one feels your heat. You stop choosing comfort zones that feel safe but slowly suffocate your spirit. You wake up, you rise, and you stop asking who you're allowed to be. It takes courage to do this. It takes discipline to stand in your truth when everything around you wants you to stay agreeable. But the longer you stay in the cage of pleasing, the more you forget how powerful your wings are. You don't need to fight for your place. You don't need to perform for approval. You don't need to explain why you're no longer apologizing for existing. Some people won't understand. That's okay. Let them misunderstand. Let them be uncomfortable. You are here to be real. And being real means choosing discomfort over dishonesty. It means being willing to lose the fake connections so you can make room for the real ones. It means being okay with standing alone, if that's the price of self-respect. You're not here to be everybody's favorite. You're here to be nobody's puppet. That is the beginning of unshakable power. The moment you kill the need to please, you stop being controlled by fear. You become grounded in truth, and that truth, once owned fully, cannot be played. It can only be respected. Something seems to have gone wrong. If someone can use your fear of being disliked against you, they own you. They don't need chains. They don't need threats. They only need you to keep wanting approval more than you want peace. That's the trap. That's how people control you without ever raising their voice. They exploit your need to be accepted. They push your buttons, not because they're strong, but because they've learned your weakness. Your addiction to being seen as good, kind, generous, agreeable. And once they see that need in you, they don't have to force you to submit. You do it on your own. You shrink yourself. You stay quiet. You bend your values. You carry weight that was never yours, and it exhausts you because deep down, you know you're performing. No one can play you if you're not playing yourself. When you kill the need to please, you become emotionally untouchable. Their guilt doesn't land. Their manipulation doesn't stick. Their silence doesn't scare you. You don't read between the lines. You don't chase closure. You don't lose sleep trying to fix the way they feel. You know what you're worth. And because of that, you move different. You speak less but say more. You stop defending your boundaries because now they're not up for debate. You don't argue with people who twist your words to make you feel wrong for choosing yourself. You see it all clearly, and clarity is the beginning of power. You have to be brave enough to be misunderstood. Not everyone will get your path. Not everyone will respect your voice. But if you need them to, you stay stuck. You water yourself down for people who don't even know how to hold truth. You hand over your emotional freedom just to avoid discomfort. And in that moment, you lose something far more precious than their approval. You lose yourself. Every time you betray your values to keep someone close, you walk further away from your own life. But the moment you stop negotiating your worth, everything shifts. The noise quiets. The people who only stayed because you were soft enough to control will start to disappear. Let them. You were never meant to be liked by everyone. That was never the goal. The goal is to live in alignment, to walk your path with your head high, your voice steady, and your heart clean. Not because you convinced everyone to agree with you, but because you finally agreed with yourself. That is where confidence is born, not from applause, but from integrity. When you stop needing external confirmation, you move in silence, you protect your peace, and you stop giving energy to anything that threatens your sense of self. That's not ego, that's clarity, that's discipline. That's what separates the free from the followers. If they can't make you feel guilty, they can't make you comply. If they can't shame you, they can't shape you. When you kill the need to please, they lose their script. And you finally get to write your own. You don't owe anyone an explanation for healing. You don't need to justify the boundaries that protect your sanity. When you finally stop living to be liked, you begin living to be real. And realness demands separation from anything that thrives on your self-betrayal. That shift is uncomfortable. Because the truth is, many people around you were not attached to you. They were attached to who you pretended to be. The agreeable version, the silent one. The one who said yes when everything inside screamed no. So when you stop playing that role, they pull away. Not because you did something wrong, but because your growth exposes the game they were playing. They needed you unaware. They needed you guilty. They needed you insecure. Because the moment you became conscious, they lost control. You're not cold for protecting your soul. You're not mean for saying no with confidence. The world will try to convince you that strength is cruelty and boundaries are walls. But those are lies told by people who benefited from your weakness. The truth is, boundaries are bridges to peace. They are the dividing line between manipulation and maturity, between chaos and clarity. When you say, "Oh, this is where I stop bending," you don't destroy love, you purify it. You stop being the emotional sponge for everyone else's dysfunction. You stop absorbing pain that isn't yours. You stop rescuing people from the consequences they keep choosing. Free yourself. Emotional freedom is not given, it's taken. Taken from the hands of guilt, shame, fear, and false loyalty. Taken back by the part of you that's tired of shrinking to fit spaces you've outgrown. You were not born to be emotionally small. You were not built to walk on eggshells in your own life. You were made to move boldly, speak clearly, and live with intention. Every time you choose your values over validation, you take your power back. Every time you refuse to be manipulated by silence, rejection, or guilt, you build resilience. You become unshakable, not because you're numb, but because you're grounded. When they can no longer manipulate your need to be liked, they realize they have no access point, no entry, no leverage. That's when you become truly dangerous. Not violent, but untouchable. Not ruthless, but unbothered. You stop giving them the script to control you. You stop handing them the keys to your peace. You walk away from the old self who needed constant reassurance, and you become the version of you that doesn't flinch when misunderstood. You simply embody it. There is a silence that comes with this level of strength, a quiet power that doesn't yell or prove. It just exists. That is the power they can't play. You weren't born to become a shapeshifter, constantly adjusting who you are to keep others from being upset. That's not love. That's self-abandonment disguised as loyalty. You don't owe anyone your peace just to make them comfortable. You don't owe anyone your silence just to avoid conflict. Because every time you quiet your voice to protect someone else's comfort, you betray the very part of you that is trying to break free. And the more you betray yourself, the more fragmented you become. That's how your power leaks out, slowly, quietly, unnoticed, until you wake up one day feeling like a ghost in your own life. But now you're waking up. You're seeing it. The pattern, the price, the truth, that constant urge to please wasn't kindness. It was fear of rejection. Fear of being seen as difficult. Fear of being alone. But fear doesn't protect you. It paralyzes you. And when you make decisions based on fear, you lose sight of who you are. You live on autopilot, saying yes when you mean no, smiling when you want to cry, staying silent when your soul is screaming for honesty. That is no way to live. That is not living. That's surviving. That's performing. And you weren't born to be a performance. You were born to be whole. So now you rise, you reclaim your voice. You stop seeking external validation to confirm your worth. You know who you are and you act like it. You're not rude for having standards. You're not arrogant for choosing peace. You're not selfish for protecting your time, your energy, your mental clarity. You are simply awake. Awake to the game, awake to the emotional manipulation, awake to the guilt tactics and the subtle punishments used to keep you in line. But you're not playing anymore. You don't need their permission to stand tall. You don't need their approval to live free. Because once you no longer need to be liked, you're free to be respected. And once you no longer need to be accepted, you're free to be powerful. This is your shift. This is your awakening. And nothing is more dangerous to the ones who tried to control you than the version of you that no longer needs their validation. You become dangerous the moment you no longer seek acceptance from people who benefit from your silence. When their opinion no longer shapes your identity, their power over you collapses. That's when the game ends. The game that kept you small. The game where you were expected to shrink, to smile, to stay agreeable while your own needs were buried beneath their comfort. But you've seen too much now. You've felt the pain of being invisible. You've tasted the emptiness of being everyone's version of you except your own, and you're done with it. That old role is dead. You are not here to be anyone's puppet. Real power begins where the need to please ends. When you kill the compulsion to be liked, you begin to lead your own life, not in defiance, not in rebellion, but in truth, calm, grounded, solid truth. Because you know who you are. You know what you stand for. You've paid the price of pretend. And you're not interested in collecting more regret just to make others feel okay. The moment you decide you will not be shaped by guilt, shame, or fear, you become unshakable. The moment you walk away from the idea that your worth depends on how many people approve of you, you walk straight into freedom. This is where confidence is born, not from praise, but from inner alignment, not from applause, but from integrity. You become strong when you no longer trade your peace for someone else's comfort. You become unbreakable when you're willing to be misunderstood, disliked, or even rejected, because being true to yourself matters more than their temporary opinion. Most people are not used to honesty that doesn't ask for permission. They're not ready for clarity that refuses to be softened. But that's not your burden to carry. You're not responsible for how others react to your truth. You are only responsible for living it. Oh, Lord. And the truth is this. You are not here to play small so others don't feel insecure. You are not here to dim your light so someone else doesn't feel overshadowed. You are not here to stay silent so you don't upset the balance of someone else's illusion. You are here to live fully, authentically, powerfully, and that means you will disappoint people. You will unsettle them. You will be called selfish, intimidating, even cold. Let them talk. Let them talk. Let them project. Let them label. None of it matters, because their noise is nothing compared to your clarity. Their discomfort is nothing compared to your peace. This is what it means to choose yourself, not once, not just when it's easy, but consistently, boldly, relentlessly, even when it costs you approval, even when it costs you connection. Because if you have to abandon yourself to keep someone in your life, they were never meant to stay. The ones who love the real you will rise with you. The rest were part of the lesson, not the destination. And you're finally free to stop performing and start living. When you stop seeking validation, you stop negotiating your identity. No longer are you waiting for permission to exist, to speak, to choose. You begin to stand where you once bent. You begin to speak where you once swallowed silence. The power of pleasing others kept you trapped because you believed your safety depended on being accepted. Safety does not live in the approval of others. It lives in your ability to stand in your truth no matter how uncomfortable it makes the world around you. When you abandon the need to please, you step out of a life designed to keep you small and into a life that demands your full presence. The addiction to being liked is subtle. It disguises itself as kindness, as humility, as good intentions. But beneath it is fear. The fear of being left, judged, excluded. And that fear controls more people than any law or rule. But what if you could feel that fear and still act with power? What if your self-worth no longer depended on being understood? That is where real courage lives. Not in avoiding rejection, but in facing it without flinching. Because what you choose to tolerate teaches others how to treat you. And if you keep teaching the world that your boundaries can be moved, that your voice can be ignored, then they will never stop asking you to shrink. You were not built to live for their comfort. You were built to lead your life with clarity and strength. When you stop chasing their approval, something unexpected happens. You attract respect, not because you demand it, but because you embody it. People begin to notice you don't bend for shallow praise. You don't dilute yourself to fit in. You walk differently, speak differently. And it's not arrogance, it's liberation. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You have already chosen yourself. The most powerful people in the world are not loud. They are not aggressive. They are simply rooted in who they are. And when you kill the need to please, you plant those same roots. Deep, unshakable. You don't need to scream to prove your worth. You don't need to explain your choices to everyone. You don't owe the world an explanation for your peace. When you own your path, people either fall in line with it or fall away. And either outcome is a blessing. You do not need to please to be worthy. You do not need to conform to be respected. You do not need to perform to be loved. If love, respect, or acceptance require performance, they were never real. Real connection honors who you are, not who you pretend to be. So stop apologizing for your standards. Stop shrinking your spirit to accommodate small minds. Stop asking for permission to be whole. You don't need it. You never did. This is your moment to reclaim yourself, entirely, unapologetically, without compromise. Let the world adjust. You won't.